Welcome to the May edition of the Golden Circle Club. So this is the monthly overview video. So welcome new members if you're catching this as a part of your Golden Circle membership. If you're seeing this on YouTube, you'll find out more details about how you can get more astrology every month in the description below. So 2020, if we were to describe this year as a play or a performance, we've just had the first act. Okay, so we've had the Saturn-Pluto conjunction. We've had 12 weeks of Mars in Saturn-ruled sign with Saturn co-present. So just to quickly reflect on that, early February, we had Mars move into Capricorn where it was joined by Saturn, or it joined Saturn, and then Saturn ingressed into Aquarius around the equinox, around March 21, and then Mars followed Saturn on the very end of March. And so we've had an unusual occurrence there where Mars and Saturn have been in each other's signs for 12 weeks. So that's not normally what happens. And so what's happening in the month of May is that from the first time since February, we've got the planet Mars in a sign that's A, not ruled by Saturn, and B, not in part of the Capricorn, Aquarius, Saturn alignment. So Mars is a little bit more fancy and free to do what it likes, which in some circumstances would be really lovely. But given the current state of the world, maybe not. But anyway, so that's one key difference with this month, and I think we're collectively really going to feel that. Mars will enter Pisces on the 12th of May in the Northern Hemisphere, and that will be felt more strongly here in Australia on the 13th. So that mid-month Mars shift will really highlight this month as well. In addition to that, May is also the month of retrogrades. So we have within a 3 to 4 day period from about the 12th to the 15th, depending on which part of the planet you're on, we'll have Saturn station retrograde, we will have Venus station retrograde, and then Jupiter as well. So even though Saturn and Jupiter will have their feels, they always do, I feel that the Venus retrograde is going to be definitely more noticeable, definitely more personal, and definitely more introspective and contemplative this month. So because we've kind of got this shift of Mars, we've got Venus moving backwards, it's almost like let's just kind of take a step back and towards something a little bit different to give us that time and space to reflect on what has been and where we are going. And so this is why I'm calling the month of May the intermission month, for us to pause and reflect and maybe push those Mars directions into new directions. And for each one of us, to various extents, we have had a lot change over these last sort of 6 to 12 weeks. For many of us, our lives look very different. So as Venus stations retrograde and moves backwards through the sign of Gemini, we're really going to be reflecting and revising and cohesively trying to figure out within us is what is it that we really value now. Chances are that what was important to you as 2020 began is very different now because circumstances have changed. And it's quite possible that what you value at the moment that you're watching this video will be very different than when Venus winds up this retrograde phase in June. So lots changed, and Venus is giving us that time to really think about and reflect social situations, relationships. Many of us have either been very isolated If we live alone, we've continued to live alone. If we live with our partner or our family, we've been sort of in a cabin fever situation. So each of us have had very different social dynamics and relationship dynamics. And the Venus retrograde phase is really going to help us internalize and get some ideas around how we want to do relationships moving forward. So if you want to learn more about Venus and her retrograde, I do have a previous video where I've really fleshed out the different parts of the Venus retrograde cycle and what you can expect during different parts of that. So as the relationship planet does station retrograde, what will occur, and this is around the 13th or 14th, depending on what side of the globe you're on, she's going to do so forming a very tense square to Neptune. So that's going to flavor the entire retrograde process, for the most part, at least the beginning of it. So there may be this feeling of disillusionment, disappointment, or perhaps on the flip side, a lot of hope or optimism for how relationships and social circumstances can be moving forward. I'm not 100% certain about the status of the rest of the world and what governments are choosing to do. However, I know in Australia, as Venus is grinding to a halt, many of our politicians are getting together and making choices around, do we reopen the schools? What levels of restrictions are we changing? What businesses can open again? So this may be great in some circumstances, but really not so great in others. So it really depends. These sorts of situations can be a double-edged sword, but when it comes to Venus, relationships, relating, one-on-one interpersonal relationships, and in the sign of Gemini, where she's really wanting to get out there and do all the things, being in a tense connection with Neptune, it's like we have all this hope that things could be just as they were, but also there's this rose-colored glasses component there where it's like, oh, we really need to think about this. We really need to take some caution there. So when it comes to our social lives this month, I think caution is still very, very important. And, on the more personal level, what's really important to us is going to become very highlighted. So whenever Venus retrogrades, regardless of what sign it is, and Venus retrograded in Gemini the last time was in 2012, the things that we've been glazing over or, glossing over, which is something Venus can do, is may become more intensified or obvious. This can be, a great thing in some situations, turning a blind eye, ignorance can be bliss. But then on the other side, it might sort of intensify situations where big questions get asked. And what is it that I really want? And that is the ultimate sort of end point with Venus retrograde. What do I want out of this circumstance? What are my values? So it's a time for everybody, to a certain extent, to really reflect what is really important to me, particularly as we continue not only what is the emotional roller coaster, but now we've got a retro roller coaster to work through this month. So this is a bit of a time to just take a step back and think about, Venus and Gemini, let's talk about how we're going to move forward. So bit of an intermission month. And the reason for that is because once Venus winds up her retrograde, once Mars exits Pisces, then we've got Mars in Aries, and that's going to be there until the very beginning of 2021. So this really is our breathe and pause time. And this may be like, oh, I don't really want to breathe and pause anymore, but I think it will be important to actually think about it as we start to move forward, as we start to kind of, suss out the world again. Let's do it in a way that is thought out, and we're not clouded by false hope or false flags or false visions of how things could or should be, and let's maybe look at them for how they really are. So I'm going to flesh out the month of May in each of the weekly videos and help give you some tips and tricks to help you live a more divinely inspired life. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I look forward to catching you in the next video, and I wish you all the best for the month of May.